بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونستهديه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا فمن يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد السلام عليكم and good morning. It is an immense honor, a privilege to be here with you this morning. MashaAllah, I travel often. I do work in many Islamic communities, both nationally and internationally. But to prepare for a lecture just about 5 or 7 minutes from where I live was probably the reason why I was late this morning. Honestly. I told my wife, she said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I have to go to ICNA." And I said, it's just such a convenience because I literally live about, 5 minutes from here. When I looked at the topic of status quo, the first thing that came to my mind is that we have an immense amount to be thankful for. Even when we start discussing the status quo, it is important not to start your reflection upon the status quo thinking about everything that is negative. We have to also think about all of the positives that are presenting themselves in this moment. The Prophet ﷺ said in an authentic hadith that the hardest prayers on the munafiq, on the hypocrite, and remember, a hypocrite is someone that outwardly displays the shi'ar, right? They outwardly display an affiliation, a connection, a relationship with Islam, but inwardly they don't have any iman. They don't have any faith. And he said the hardest prayers on the munafiq are Salat al-Fajr and Salat al-Isha. And when I was younger, I embraced Islam when I was about 15. I used to have all of my own interpretations for why these prayers were difficult for a hypocrite. And I thought it's because they probably at the club or coming in from the club or they're probably partying or that's the time when hypocrites get high. None of those were the asbab al-wurud, were the reason why the Prophet ﷺ said that hadith. The reason why he said that ﷺ is that, of course, in Medina, as in the world at that time, there was no electricity. So if a person came to Salat al-Isha or Salat al-Fajr, no one was going to know that they were there. They would have to be there strictly out of devotion to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As opposed to Salat al-Dhuhr or Salat al-Asr or Salat al-Maghrib, people will be able to see them. Oh, there's so-and-so, he's pious. Oh, there's so-and-so, she's pious. But Salat al-Isha and Salat al-Fajr, if a person attended, one could rest assured that they did so out of devotion. Now, why do I begin with that hadith? Many of my teachers tell me that in our time, where being Muslim means being publicly maligned, it means being passed on for promotions at your job, for a sister to show up wearing hijab, for a sister to walk the street wearing hijab, this is to open herself to all of the blame, to open herself to all of the criticism, all of the condemnation publicly associated with Islam right now. For a man to actually tell people, I'm Muslim, I don't do this. I'm Muslim, I don't do that. Or even just to identify with Islam in name, just nominally. There is no worldly benefit that one accrues from doing that. One of my teachers told me that in this time, we're not saying that there's no such thing as nifaq. We're not saying that. All of us have to have that internal compass that we're checking our sincerity, checking our commitment, checking our devotion. However, this is a time that you can trust that everybody here publicly associating with Muslims, publicly identifying with Islam, is doing so out of sincere faith. And this is the blessing of the time that we're living in. There is nothing to gain, there's nothing dunyawi to gain through being Muslim. I remember being in Cairo. I lived in Cairo for a very long time. أنا مصري بكل فخر تمصرت يعني. Right? When you eat as many full mudammis sandwiches as I have, and you get cheated by as many taxi drivers as I have, you are given that honorary Egyptian status. And once I was sitting in a dry cleaners, and this dry cleaners was owned by some Coptic Christians. And one of them made a reference to a biblical verse that I was familiar with. So I commented on the verse in Amiyah. And they looked and said, "You know something about the Kitab al-Muqaddas? You know something about the Bible?" And I said, "Yes." They said, "How?" I said, "Well, I used to be Christian." All of them mouths agape. And I don't think they had ever talked to someone that voluntarily chose to become a Muslim. They said, "You used to be Christian and you became Muslim?" I said, "Yes." Almost like looking around at the dysfunction saying, "You wanted to be a part of this?" I said, "Yes." And then I said to them, "What would happen if one of you wanted to change your religion?" And he looked at me and said, "My dad would kill me." And I thought it was mubalagh. I thought it was tazayyud fil kalam. I thought he was exaggerating or being, facetious. So I started laughing. Then he stared at me with grave seriousness. Hayumawitni. My father would kill me. And then I realized that this liberal context that had given me the opportunity to change my religion, yes, for me as a parent of young Muslim children, it's frightening to think that they see this openness out there, that you can do what you want, be as you want to be. However, the good thing, the silver lining in that, is that if they choose Islam, and of course I'm praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that they do, and I'm trying to exemplify the character of a Muslim, I can trust that they're not doing it because of familial pressure. They're not doing it for social conformity. They're doing it because they really believe it. And all of you are here because you really believe it. And this is a blessing. We have to recognize that we get an opportunity to taste faith in the way that the Sahaba did, radiyallahu anhum jami'an. We get to taste faith in that way. And this is very special. That's point number one. Point number two is that we have to recognize that we are here not by accident. Many of you know of this something. How many of you have heard of something called the mihna? Okay, mashallah, astute students of Islamic studies. The mihna was a great schism where Khalifa Ma'mun, he was an Abbasid caliph, he adopted the Mu'tazili school, which is, I'm not going to take you into all of these theological niceties, but one of the principles of that school was that the Quran was created. And the belief of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah has always been that the Quran is the uncreated speech of God. The Quran has no beginning, just like God has no beginning. And this became, I hang out with Dr. Sherman Jackson, so I know all kinds of funny words that nobody else uses. This became something of a shibboleth, which is like a test. If somebody wanted to know your political allegiances, your political alliances, they could ask you this question about the createdness of the Quran. What do you say about khalq al-Quran? And many Sunnis capitulated. They caved in. They just started saying, yes, the Quran is created, but in their hearts they didn't believe it. But one man, Ahmad ibn Hanbal, radiyallahu anhu, he became noted for stating the position of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah openly without any fear, and he was beaten for that. Now, I'm not telling you this to talk about Sheikh Ahmad ibn Hanbal. I'm telling you this because Many of us know the story. Many of us know the theological argument, but we don't look at the implication of the Quran being the uncreated speech of God. That means that God is still speaking. God is still speaking. Sometimes it frustrates me that Muslims talk about the past like it was the time of miracles. It was the time in which the will of God was being revealed. It was the time in which God was speaking. No, God is still speaking. And God decreed that this Muslim community would be here in this country. Look around this room. Do you know how difficult it would be to find any other room this diverse, this talented? Now that I'm in the room, this stylish, you know what I'm saying? Do you know how difficult this would be? This is not being done by accident. I want you to think about Yusuf alayhi salam, betrayed by his brothers, thrown into a well, abandoned, sold into slavery, sexually assaulted another time, jailed in spite of his known innocence, left to languish in prison. He renders service to his fellow inmates by interpreting their dreams. One of them is liberated from prison, forgets all about him. Then the king has a dream. This formerly incarcerated person recalls Yusuf. Yusuf interprets the dream of the king. He's appointed to the station of treasurer. Then he's appointed to an even higher station than that. And he had to go through all of that just to arrive at his destiny. And he's the one who invites the children of Israel to avert the famine that they were all experiencing. He invites the children of Israel into Egypt. And this is how the children of Israel get to Egypt. They had to go through all of that. Yusuf had to go through all of that just for the children of Israel to get to Egypt. Once they get to Egypt, among them, who's the most prominent person that's born after that? Musa, alayhi salam. That's how Musa ended up in Egypt. And we know that Pharaoh at this time, he started to carry out a genocide. And we know that Moses was raised because his mother put him in the yam. She put him in the basket. He ended up being raised in the house of Pharaoh. But he had this connection to the children of Israel, so that one day when he saw one of them quarreling with an Egyptian, he struck the Egyptian. He killed the Egyptian. After that, he saw the same person quarreling again. He called the person a troublemaker. The person announces, "Are you going to kill me like you killed the man yesterday?" Musa is put to flight. He's wandering. He sees two women trying to water their flock, get water from the well to give water to their flock of sheep. Nobody is letting them draw water from the well. Even as he has the right to be completely self-indulgent and worried about himself, he does this act of khair, this act of birr for these women. They go back, they tell their father. They come, say, "My father would like to meet you." He follows them back to where they live, to the village of Midian. Their father offers him a job, offers one of his daughters in marriage. As Musa is now with his family, he sees a bush burning in the distance. And when he looks at the bush, he holds out two possibilities. I could go there and get hidayah, get guidance, huda, or a qabas min an-nar, just a firebrand. And the reason the Mufassirun say he mentioned the fire and the hidayah is because he could have a religious experience there, or it could just end up being something for a worldly benefit. Now, why am I mentioning this? Our community in America is composed mostly of two categories of Muslims. One category of Muslims is kind of like Yusuf. They only arrived at this place after betrayal, after enslavement, after assault, after unfair treatment, after incarceration, after Jim and Jane Crow. And now they're here talking about the African American Muslim community. And one segment of our community was like Musa, looking up at that burning bush, thinking, I'll go to America, I'll be safe from oppression, from usurpation, from government malpractice, from expropriation of my resources. America is a place that you can do an honest day's work and receive an honest day's wage. And this is why many of your parents decided to migrate here. But now that we are here together, we have to look at the other possibility that Musa held out, the huda, the guidance. We have a very special role to play in the United States of America. And that role is not just to be an upwardly mobile community, living in bigger homes, driving better cars. And I'm not saying this scolding you. I like nice cars too. That's why Mahina's laughing as I say it. It's not. Our goal is to help this country regain its moral conscience. This is who our community is. And when I say that, I don't mean that we want to turn California into California. No. It's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about being a moral community. Being a community that is focused on alleviating suffering from people. A man came to the Prophet ﷺ and he said, Ya Rasulullah, man ahabbu nasi ila Allah? Who are the most beloved people to Allah? Anfa'uhum li'ibadi. Those that contain the most benefit for the servants of Allah. Our calling is to be that. Now yes, part of that is about direct services. It's about charity. It's about community work. But the other part of that is al-amr bil-ma'ruf wa nahyu 'anil munkar. Commanding to what is good and forbidding what is evil. The Prophet ﷺ said in an authentic hadith, and I want you to think about this very deeply. فَمَنْ مِنْكُمْ يَرَى مُنْكَرًا. Whoever among you sees something wrong, فَلْيُغَيِّرْهُ بِيَدِهِ. Let him change it. Let her change it with their hand. And mind you, he didn't say لِيُزِيلْهُ بِيَدِهِ. He didn't say, just say remove it. He said change it. Some people think that you're doing change just by saying that things are haram. Haram, haram. I once joked with someone that, I could create an elaborate internet hoax where I said that my son Najashi was born with the knowledge of Sharia. And then I would just bring him to the front of the room and I would just say, ask him whatever question you want to ask him. Najashi al-Azim. And I would tell him, whatever they say, just say haram. He would ask a question, you would ask a question, he would say haram. 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 And I guarantee one or two people would leave the auditorium saying, MashaAllah, the Shaykh has ilm. Huwa mutamakkin jiddan. Mutamakkinun yani fi ulum al-shara'. Wallahi. That is not a minhaj, just saying haram. فَلْيُغَيِّرْهُ بِيَدِهِ. Change it to something halal. We need cultural innovators, not religious innovators, but cultural innovators. It's not enough for you to look at the dominant culture and say, it's scandalous, it's riotous, it's this, it's that. What's the alternative? Where are our designers? Where are our interior decorators? Where are our novelists? Where are our playwrights? Where are our screenwriters? It's not enough to say, this is haram. You have to provide some alternative, right? Sufyan al-Thawri, he famously said, إِنَّ الْعِلْمِ تَتَبُّعُ الرُّخَص مُسْتَنِدًا إِلَى الدَّلِيلِ. That knowledge is finding the justification for what needs to be done on the basis of proof. وَلَكِنَّ التَّشَدُّدَ يُحْسِنُهُ الْجَمِيعُ. But strictness, anybody can do that. Anyone can say this is haram and that's haram. We need to find the religious basis to become a culturally vibrant community, a vivacious community, a community that establishes and practices Islam in a beautiful and attractive way. This is how you counter the ugliness of the dominant culture. This is how it's done. Then the Prophet ﷺ said, فَإِن لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ. If he or she is unable to do that, فَبِلِسَانِهِ. Then speak out against it. Say that, you know what, this is wrong. And then offer something constructive in your feedback. Don't just say, this is wrong, this is crazy, this is bad. It would be better if, it might be more meaningful perhaps if. Then the Prophet ﷺ finally said, فَإِن لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ فَيَكْرَهُهُ فِي قَلْبِهِ وَهَذَا أَضْعَفُ الْإِيمَانِ. And if he's unable, then let him or her at the very least dislike it in their heart, and this is the weakest of faith. Now I want to talk about that for a moment. How much time do I have left? Bismillah. I want to talk about that for a moment. All about us, we see things that are wrong, and we're becoming desensitized to those things. Sometimes we don't even realize that we're becoming desensitized. There used to be a time where certain things, and by the way, I know many people get up and they talk about the things that are wrong out there, and it's just a very veiled way of talking about homosexuality. Everybody knows that's what they're talking about. Some stuff out there that you've never seen before. It's unprecedented. It's wrong. They're just talking about homosexuality. But for us, it's not just about homosexuality. It's about sexual anarchy. The idea that this aspect of human experience exists apart from what Allah wants. We don't believe that. We don't believe that there is any physical relationship without responsibility. We don't believe that. Without set responsibility, without responsibility that God legislates and defines. We don't believe that. And there used to be a time, subhanAllah, I'll tell you guys a story. You guys know the hadith where a young boy actually came to the Prophet ﷺ, and he said, Abihli az-zina, make fornication permissible for me. And it's very interesting. The Prophet ﷺ, he didn't say to the young boy, you badmash, walad mushaghib, jiddan, you troublemaking kid. He said, come here, let me talk to you. Now what I find absolutely compelling about this story is that the young man was so sure of the Prophet's gentleness, ﷺ, that he was willing to approach him after saying something that must have sounded ridiculous even to himself. Let me talk to you for a minute. If I said something crazy and my grandfather said, yeah, come here, let me talk to you for a minute, I'm already bracing myself for the slap. Okay. But he's assured of the Prophet's gentleness, ﷺ. So he approaches him with no trepidation, no fear. And the Prophet ﷺ said to him, do you have sisters? He said, yes, I have sisters. Do you have a mother? Of course I have a mother. Do you have aunts? Of course I have aunts. Would you like someone to do that to them? Meaning, would you like someone to engage in a physical relationship with them with no set responsibility toward them? Wouldn't you see that as a dishonor to them? He said, of course. The Prophet ﷺ said, likewise, other people have sisters and aunts and mothers And this is similarly disrespectful to them. So that's the hadith. One of my friends, an imam in a place that I won't say, he's sitting in his office. A young college student comes into the office, and he says, Imam, what is wrong with me and my girlfriend being together? We're in a consensual sexual relationship. What's wrong with that? And so the imam thought, this is an opportunity for me to use the hadith. So he ran through the hadith. He didn't say the prophet said, he said to the young boy, do you have sisters? And the young boy said, yes, yes, yes. When he reached the part where he said, would you like someone to do that to them? The young boy said, if that's what they want. And that's when the imam realized we're in a time and in a place that يَطْرِبُ فِيهِ الْحَلِيمُ. Even a very composed person is perturbed. He tried to use the prophetic guidance. And because the young man was so desensitized to the idea that it's not about consent, that's not our model. Consent is important. I'm not saying consent is not important. I don't want to end up on the internet. But it's not just about consent. It's about defined responsibility to one another. That for us is the enormity. That people have sexual relationships without clear responsibility to each other. For us, this is, it's unimaginable. But we see that all day, every day, to the extent that we're completely desensitized. We see people engaging each other physically, no responsibility toward each other. Doesn't mean anything to us. How are we going to remind ourselves? When they give you these papers, it's never to say that you're doing great. Alhamdulillah. How are we going to remind ourselves what we're supposed to be about as a Muslim community? And in my estimation, the only way that we can do that is being very vigilant. When you see something wrong, remind yourself, this is not right. Doesn't mean that you get to be self-righteous or rude to people. Doesn't even mean that it's perhaps the wisest thing to do to tell them that this is not right. One of the rules of al-amru bil ma'ruf wa nahyu an munkar was that if what you're doing in commanding good or forbidding evil is going to lead to a bigger evil, then it's best not to do so. This is hikmah, this is wisdom. But at the very least, remind yourself, this isn't how it's supposed to be. But don't suspend your moral judgment to just personal ethics and sexuality. When you see the maldistribution of wealth in this society, and you come from a religious community that instituted zakah, remind yourself, this is not just free enterprise capitalism. Something is wrong here. It's not supposed to be like that. When you see women being sexually objectified, remind yourself, something is wrong here. It's not supposed to be like that. So in closing, I want to reiterate. Number one, this is the time of blessing. When we talk about the status quo, it presents us with challenges, but it also presents us with opportunities. Number two, we have to become cultural producers. We have to become people that are actively engaged in not only showing ourselves, but showing the larger, greater community the beauty of Islam. I'm going to give you a homework assignment. I know it's winter break, but you're still getting homework. I want all of you to research the legacy of C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis, you probably know him as a fantasy writer. He wrote the Chronicles of Narnia. But he was also a late convert to Christianity after being an atheist aforetime. And he was a lay theologian. And in writing the Chronicles of Narnia, what he wanted to do was take core theological Christian concepts and put them into a story that everybody could grasp, no matter how they felt about religion. who is going to be our C.S. Lewis? Who is going to write something like the Chronicles of Narnia that people are watching and being entertained, but at the same time, but for us, an Islamic worldview is being taught, inculcated surreptitiously. They don't even know that it's happening, but it's happening. We need people like that. And the third thing is, if we're unable to act to change what is wrong, we have to speak out against what is wrong when it's wise to do so. And if we're unable to speak out against what is wrong, we have to, at the very least, remind ourselves that it's wrong so that we're not desensitized. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.